You all can be seated. Would you all pray with me, please? God, we thank you for this gorgeous summer day that you have given us to come together to worship you and to praise your name. We ask that you work in all of our hearts and minds to hear the word that you would have for us today. And I ask that in the coming minutes, more and more of you be seen and less of me. Amen. So I have to start off with a confession. And some of you might make fun of me for this, but I'm going to be honest with all of you. I am a Lifetime movie junkie. Few things hold my attention as well as a sappy, cheesy, dramatic Lifetime movie. Some of you guys might know what I'm talking about and don't want to admit it, and that's fine. And I can't put my finger on what makes them so engaging. It might be the bad acting, or the clunky scene transitions, or the really cliche dialogue. Or maybe it's that they're just so messy. People are involved in affairs, or dying of cancer, or finding out that they were kidnapped as a baby, or caught in an abusive relationship, or trying to rob a bank. Sometimes all of that is one movie. And Lifetime movies might be lacking in a lot of areas, but one thing that they are really great at is showing the depths of human pain and brokenness. And you know what else is really great at showing the depths of human pain and brokenness? The Bible. And a perfect example is the story of Joseph, which, as you all know, takes up a good chunk of the book of Genesis. And our text today comes from the end of the Joseph narrative. And over the last 6 weeks or so, Pastor Ted and Pastor Larry have done a great job at exploring the story of Joseph. But it's a long story with a lot of characters, so I'll give you a quick overview of the story up until this point. And I can almost guarantee you that if they made the story of Joseph into a movie, it would definitely be one that Lifetime showed every day for weeks at a time. So the Joseph narrative starts off when he started to have those crazy dreams. And those dreams suggested that one day, his brothers would bow down to him, and he would be in a place of power above his brothers. The tension builds between Joseph and his brothers, and one day, when they are tending the flocks a good distance from home, Joseph's brothers trick him and sell Joseph to a group of traveling merchants. The brothers clearly are not in it for the money, because they sold Joseph for the price of an old, crippled slave. News gets out that Joseph is dead. His father mourns his death, and the brothers pretend to care, and then everyone moves on with their lives, except for Joseph. Joseph ends up in Egypt working for the chief officer of the Pharaoh. And after falsely being accused of hitting on his boss's wife, which is definitely something that would happen in a Lifetime movie, he was thrown into prison. And while he was in prison, he got a reputation for being somebody who could correctly interpret dreams. After interpreting the dreams of the Pharaoh, he became what was essentially the governor of Egypt. And because of his correct interpretations, he was able to strictly control the food production and surplus in Egypt, which meant that he could prepare and protect the people through the impending famine. And here's where the story gets really interesting. Remember Joseph's brothers, the ones who sold him like a broken down car being sold for its parts? Well, they were hit by the famine too. So after some tough love from their dad Jacob, they decided to make the journey to Egypt to try and buy food. So when they arrived in Egypt, Joseph immediately recognized his brothers, but the brothers didn't recognize Joseph. After all, they probably assumed that he was dead at this point. So Joseph tested and tricked his brothers a couple of times just to see how well they would stand up for each other after selling one of them into slavery. But eventually, the weight of his lives became too heavy, and Joseph burst into tears, admitted his identity to his brothers, and he forgave them for selling him into slavery. For as he said, it was God's way of helping to prepare for the coming famine and help to save the people. Joseph set his brothers and his father up in the land of Goshen, and over 17 years passed before the brothers were again reunited with Joseph at the burial of their father Jacob. And this is where our passage today begins. Genesis 50, 15 through 21 reads, "Realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, 'What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all of the wrong that we did to him?' So they approached Joseph, saying, 'Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crimes of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now therefore, please forgive the crime of the servants of God your father.' Joseph wept as they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him, and said, 'We are here as your slaves.' But Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intend to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones.' In this way he reassured them, speaking kindly to them." So whether you're watching a Lifetime movie or you're reading the Bible, it's generally painfully evident that we are a fallen people and we do not treat each other too well. We cheat, we steal, we murder, we lie, we gossip. Our brokenness tends to get in the way of things. We trip and stumble over it as we chase after healthy relationships with others. And one thing our brokenness really tends to get in the way of is forgiveness. We all know that forgiving each other is not easy. Humor me for a second and close your eyes. Try to think of a time when someone said that they had forgiven you, but you weren't quite sure that you believed them. Even though that they said that they had forgiven you, maybe they started to treat you differently, or they didn't want to spend time with you anymore, or maybe they held the situation over your head, constantly reminding you of the ways that you had wronged them. Now picture a time when you told someone that you had forgiven them, but then you realized it would be harder than you thought. You found it painful or frustrating to be around that person, or simply thinking about that person gave you a sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. You can open your eyes. All of these are results of human brokenness. We are flawed, and therefore the best we can offer each other is flawed forgiveness. When we experience this kind of imperfect forgiveness, it is easy to feel incomplete, like a part of you isn't in place. It's kind of like trying to glue shattered glass back together with Elmer's glue. It might hold together for a bit, but as soon as it's tested, as soon as you try to put water in that glass, the glue dissolves away and it will fall apart all over again. Sometimes we really do try to offer each other forgiveness, and we really genuinely give it our best, but we trip over our human brokenness and fall short of what forgiveness really truly means. So this imperfect, broken forgiveness is the exact kind of forgiveness that Joseph's brothers were expecting to receive from him. Remember, teary-eyed Joseph told his brothers that he had forgiven them once already in this story 17 years earlier. And after these 17 years pass, the brothers are still worried that Joseph is holding a grudge against them. Maybe after a lifetime of thinking about what they had done, they realized how horrible their actions were. And maybe they truly didn't believe that someone could forgive them for that. I know that I can relate to that situation, and maybe you can too. Sometimes we mess up so badly that we don't know if we can ever truly be forgiven. Joseph's brothers were ready for the punishment that they rightly deserved. They stepped up before their brother that they had sold into slavery, and they offered themselves as his slaves. But Joseph surprises his brothers. I imagine Joseph with tears in his eyes and a gentle grin on his face, walking over to his brothers, lifting them off of their knees and saying, "My brothers, I already forgave you, remember? Everything worked out the way it was meant to. I love you, and I'm going to take care of you and your children and your family continually until you are back on your feet. Can you imagine being the brothers in this situation? What an amazingly selfless and radical act of forgiveness Joseph offers. Joseph does a really great thing here, something that might be hard for us to imagine doing in our own lives. And yet, Joseph's incredible act of forgiveness is only a tiny glimpse of the forgiveness we receive from God. We are broken and sinful, but our God is not. Our God is the creator of the universe. Our God knows the number of stars in the sky, the number of grains of sand on every beach, and the number of hairs on each of your heads. God is perfect, and God's love for us is perfect. His love is patient, and it is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, and it is not resentful. Our God is not resentful, and God's forgiveness is not resentful. It doesn't come with any strings attached. It doesn't carry heavy baggage along with it. There is no reminder of all the ways that we have wronged God, and there is no fear of being treated any differently. There is no guilt trip. No, quite the opposite. God's forgiveness is freeing. We throw ourselves at God's feet, acknowledging all the ways that we have done wrong, repenting for our sins, and often fearing that the wrongs are too deep to be forgiven and the wounds too deep to be healed. But then God lifts us up, wipes the tears from our eyes, and says, "My child, you are forgiven." What a truly glorious gift we receive from God in this. God has lifted an immovable burden from our shoulders, and God has freed us from unbreakable chains. This is the forgiveness offered to us by our God, the God of the universe. This is the forgiveness offered by the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, and of Joseph. Joseph forgave his brothers. His forgiveness was not perfect. How could it be? He was human and broken just like his brothers and just like us. But the forgiveness that Joseph offered was a tiny, imperfect glimpse of the vast, blinding, and beautiful forgiveness offered to us by God. Like Joseph, we have been wronged by those that we love and those that love us. We have been hurt by family members, significant others, friends, teachers, and strangers. We have been scarred, we have been wronged, and we have been betrayed. We, no doubt, are a broken and fractured people, and even yet, we have received perfect, loving, and freeing forgiveness from God. A forgiveness that we, in our human minds, cannot even fully fathom. A forgiveness with no strings attached, and a forgiveness which does not cause a burden, but lifts a burden. And having freely received this gift from God, we are now free to extend that forgiveness to others around us. We are free to truly forgive those who have hurt us. We are free to forgive ourselves for the damage that we inflict upon ourselves. And we are free to forgive those who have wronged us, those who have broken our confidence, those who have spoken ill of us. We are free to offer them forgiveness with no strings attached, because our God, the all-loving God of the universe, has perfectly and completely